And then after we get all 10 answered, we will go back and talk about the ones that you don't match on. All right? So number 1, who's got it? Answer is
B.
B. All right? Mark that down. We'll talk about it if it doesn't match you. Number 2, Bryce. A. Number 3, Catherine.
I got A.
A. Number 4, Patrick.
D.
You said what?
D.
D. All right. 5. We're just taking answers right now. 5. Gillett.
C.
C. 6. Daniel.
C.
C. 7. And B. 7 B. 8.
I got B.
B. 9. Raina. A. And 10. That's all we're going to talk about here to start. Number 10. Drew.
B.
B. All right, so what do we disagree on? There were a couple in there I disagree on. That does not mean anything. It just means I didn't match and I need to talk about it. Did you have one you didn't match on? All right, I'm counting on you. Of course, I didn't write it down. So, you guys matched on all those? Daniel?
4.
4. Yeah, I thought that was one I didn't match on. 4 says we have a polynomial function that's odd. Now remember, if it's odd, it either starts down and ends up, or it starts down, or starts up and ends down, right? Now also, if it's odd, it means that it's symmetric about the origin. It means if you plug in a negative, you get a negative. But you get the opposite of what you got when you put in the positive. So if this guy, and I didn't draw mine symmetric to the origin. So if this guy has a maximum at 3, negative 4, right? So if this is the maximum at 3, negative 4, that's a relative maximum, then what has to be true about P of negative 3? Negative 3 has to be a minimum, doesn't it? A maximum? Let me back up. If 3, negative 4 is a maximum, then negative 3, 4 must be on the curve, because if you change the sign on input, you change the sign on output, and that has to be a minimum. Now, it doesn't have to be a cube, so it can have all kinds of jigglies in it, but if this is the high point, then that's going to be the low point of that part of the graph, a relative maximum. A relative maximum. So odd, this is the important part to remember. Odd means if we change the sign on x, we're going to change the sign on y. If this function had been even, then what would this be if the function had been even? Still negative 4, because even means if you change the sign on input, you do not change the sign on output. Okay, odd, even. All right, there was one more I didn't match on. Did you guys match on all the rest? Seven. 7, what did you say the answer was? Okay, I think it's D. I think it's D. I think 7 is D, but let's see if I'm right or not. So what does 7 say? The table gives me F, and G 1, the graph of G is constructed by applying the transformations. Okay, so we have a horizontal dilation by a factor of 2. Okay, now you are horizontally stretching your picture by a factor of 2. Then what does this number have to be? What would accomplish a horizontal stretch of 2? Not a 2, a 1/2. Because, remember, that number divides the horizontal. And dividing by a half is the same as timesing by 2. Okay? Now, there's a vertical dilation by a factor of 3. The vertical number, the amplitude number, is what it is. So if it's a 3 out there, you're going to stretch it by 3. Vertical. This is your vertical, this is your horizontal. This one multiplies, this one divides. And then a vertical translation, that means, sometimes they call it midline. That is, you're picking the whole thing up. 5. So this is your function G. So we want to know the value of G of -4. Well, if I put in -4 here, that's going to be -2. And f of -2, I should be able to get out of my chart. F of -2 is 5. So I have 3 times 5 plus 5. So it looks like the answer is 20. Is that what I said? D, yeah. All right, so I don't know who gave me the answer. Someone missed that. Is it all straight now? This concept comes in lots of different kinds of problems. You have to know this if you're graphing a sine curve, for example. There's a coefficient here, you have to know what that does. It divides the horizontal. It multiplies the vertical, raises you up. All right, were there any others?
We go through font number 5.
5. I said 5, I said C.
That's what I hear.
Okay. All right, so, we are going to build the function H over G. Okay, according to the problem, we're doing H over G. And I have to make some conclusions about this. And really, the only question, this doesn't involve like poles and all that. This just involves domain. In a rational function, my domain is going to be everything except what makes the denominator 0. So what makes the denominator 0? I'm going to factor it. So whatever x is, domain x, whatever x is, it cannot be 0, 6, or -3. All real numbers where x is not -3, 0, or 6. Okay?
Can you do number 9?
9. Geometric sequence or graphing figure. Which of the following is an expression for the nth term of the geometric sequence? Okay, so remember, we have different ways of expressing general terms, but I did it like this. But there are other ways you can alter that, express it other ways. So I need to come up with an expression that produces the points 1, 8, 2, 4, 3, 2, and so on. I need to come up with an expression that does that, right? So one option you always have is start plugging, like, if you plug 1 into the equation, it should give you 8. If you plug 2 in, it should give you 4, and so on. So one option you have is just to literally go through the equations and find the one that works. Now, you can hopefully tell by looking at this that the ratio, what's happening to these y values? Yeah, so the ratio is 1/2. So whatever the nth term is, it's going to involve a 1/2 to a power. And then a sub 1 represents the first term. Now you have to be careful because that means if you plug in 1, you have to get, this is what it's going to equal, right? So if I plug in 1, this goes away, doesn't it? So can I put in 8 there? If I put in 1, that would be 1/2 to the 0 times 8. Does that work? Yeah. So is that an option? No, it's not. So I need to, that is not an option. So I need to modify that. Okay. So tell me what happens if I, and again, it's probably easier and it's probably just start plugging in points, but tell me what happens if I make this a 4. Well, if I make that a 4, obviously I'm gonna have to change my exponent, right? What am I gonna do to my exponent?
minus 2.
Make it 1 less, yeah, so it's gonna have to be n minus 2. All right, let's try that. If I put in 1, that makes 1/2 to the negative first, which is 2 times 4 is 8. So right off the bat, I think you can rule out B because it has the wrong ratio. And then after that, you just want to find the one that works. Okay, anybody else? That's the beauty of multiple choice.
Can you go through 6?
I thought the answer was C. Is that what we said? All right. So which of the following could be an expression for G? Well, remember, it's a polynomial. So how many, each 0 is going to have a factor. So it looks like we've got a 0 that's going to be x plus 8. Does that make sense to you? Because we've got an x-intercept at negative 8. And then we've got 1 at, I guess, 1. Those are my options. And then there's 1 at 5. Now, there is no way I know that from the picture, but I know it from my answer choices. All right? Now, what's happening here? Well, at 5, something different is happening. What's happening?
It's bouncing.
It's bouncing, which means that has a power of, well, has an even power. I like a power of 2.
Yeah.
Now, okay, then C has to be the answer because that's the only one that has that. Now, do I know by the picture that there's a 0.25 out here? No, but I know whatever's out there is positive. How do I know that?
It starts up.
Up. Yep, that's positive on a even function. So none of these numbers, specific numbers, do I know other than just looking at my answer choices.
There was an odd function where it started up and then down.
No, positive starts down and ends up.
Okay, so
Yeah, that's what positives do. Now, if you put a negative coefficient in front of it, yeah, then it would be upside down. All right, anything else from those 10? Are we good? All right, so here, I don't know what the best thing to do is. How about, I can stand up here and do them, or you can work in groups and every 5 problems we'll do a double check and make sure everybody's on board. What works for you the best?
I like that second.
You like the second option?
Yeah, let's do
That work? Okay, so get in your groups, let's do the next 5 problems. So it's 11 to 15, and You're gonna come up and write your answer on the board, we're gonna check and we'll talk about the ones we don't match on. So, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. As you get them, come up and put them on the board.
Well, do you wanna know why?
And I need,
Because
There are 24 hours in a day. I mean, if you don't know that, no, you probably shouldn't be teaching.
Julia. You know Julia?
I usually pull the answers to get like a sense of what's going on, and then I go back up to the problem. I hate half hours. That gives me flashbacks to so I still don't really know how to do that. It was very messy.
It's so true though.
Because it's increasing.
it was dead. Pass that key. I'm so tired. Oh, wait for 12? Yeah.
Go down a half, you get have 24 hours.
I don't even know.
I don't think it's B because I don't want the ones auto. Same with D.
You can't have a negative in that. So it can't be A. I'll write.
I'm weirdly good at reading. I didn't know. PRT.
Completely inside.
Every time it's
Yeah.
circle around.
Yeah. Can that just be X?
No,
So it's not over.
How did you get that?
Because don't just divide the elements is minus X, and then you divide just X squared equals 4. No, he's looking to divide the,
I put A.
divide X. So just be X squared equals 4. So you do 2.
We don't know what we're doing.
No, we see it.
Okay.
Oh wait, no,
So I
Totally so dumb.
I don't know why I didn't see
I didn't know.
I didn't even see that one from
The way it's worded is so.
Yeah, it's just that it's an L. Wait, D is 24 D.
Would it just be 24
So I started by, because when you subtract, it would be x cubed over x, so it's the natural log of x squared equals 4. Oh wait, never mind.
It says T equals 24 D.
Oh, I didn't see the Ellen here, and I was like, why
If
is
it's
it
after how many years,
Oh,
then
yeah.
the hours, it would have to be.
Are we struggling here? You guys don't get these done?
There's one of them.
It's okay.
Thanks, man. That one.
Thanks,
Got handed to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see, right?
Did you do all 5 of them? Put them up there, let's see. Alright, we got a group putting their answers on the board. Talk about it.
I think we're go right. Did we do 16 as well? I think we kind of 15.
Yeah, we can keep going, but we're checking groups of 5. So we're checking groups of 5.
Amplitude's gotta be 3. That's
So you do square root of
15, correct? We have 15.
I don't actually know if I'm allowed to.
Alright, let's take a look at these
I
and
it can't be
see.
negative because you can't put a negative into
On test day, nobody's gonna be giving you the answers, guys, so we need to be able to figure this out. Number 11, they said A. The linear model is not appropriate because there is a clear pattern in the graph of the residuals. Isn't that the rule?
Yes.
The residuals must be random, right? Now, you don't want all your residuals above positive, and you don't want all of them negative, but you also don't want a pattern, you want them mixed around, right? So is everybody good on that one? Okay. Number 12. 12 is, we need an equation or a model for M of T. And they chose 54 times 1.061 to the 4t. Now, let's talk about this. First of all, does everybody understand the 54? All your options start with the 54, because in an exponential expression, that is your initial value. You're starting with 54 or whatever, $1 billion, okay? Now, what does this represent? When you see this decimal, what is that telling you? 6.1% increase. This is the original 100, and then an additional 6.1. Now, if we took out this 4, that would be every year, because T is being measured in years. So that would say every year, this thing is growing by 6.1%. Now, is that what's happening? No, it's actually growing by that percentage 4 times a year. So in 1 year, it's actually grown 4 times. So that's why they put a 4 there. Look, if you put a 1 in 1 year, guys, look, if you put a 1 in for 1 year, then that means your money has grown 4 times. Is that what you want to have happen? Yes, because it's growing every quarter. So if you miss that, does that make sense to you now? All right, 13 is kind of the same. 13 says we need an equation. They said D. So they said A sub naught. Don't let that confuse you. That's just your beginning amount. That's what I'm starting with. And what's happening this time? 0.5 D over 8. Okay, wait a second. So this was the original thing they gave us. All right, what's D measured in? D is measured in days. Okay, so what does that tell you? That's the original that they gave you. That says whatever you start with is being halved every 8 days. If you put a 1, or excuse me, if you put an 8 in there, 8 days, that would be halved. All right, now what are you trying to do? You're trying to figure out, after hours. So instead of having your formula in terms of days, you wanna make it in terms of hours. Okay, so they said D, so 1/192 T. Where T now is in hours, right? Or no, what is T now? T hours, yeah, T is in hours. Okay. How come, why is it 1/192? There's 24 hours in a day. It's already taking 8 days, right, to reduce by 1/2. So won't it take 192 hours to reduce by 1/2? That's why they put 1/192. These can be a little tricky, I'm with you, but if you stop and think about what's happening, and if you plug in some numbers, you can tell whether your formula is doing what it's supposed to be doing. Good deal. 14, they said C. What do you think about that? That one you have to be careful on. They're right. I think they're right. But here's what we have to think about. We have ln x cubed minus ln x equal to 4. What do you do when you subtract logarithms?
Divide.
You divide. So this is x cubed over x, which is x squared. How do you solve a logarithmic equation? You log roll it. Your base on ln is e. So you're going to say e to the 4th equals x squared. And then you're going to square root both sides. And when you square root both sides, you actually get plus or minus. Some of you keep forgetting that on your quizzes. When you square root, it's plus or minus. Now, in this problem, it can't be the negative. Because right here, well, actually, or right here, either place, can you have ln negative number? No. So the negative root is actually extraneous.
So why can't you have a negative number in this?
You cannot take the logarithm of a negative number. If you think about that, take, let's say the log base 10 of negative 2. Okay, what does that mean? That means 10 to the x equals negative 2. Can you raise 10 to a power and get negative 2? The domain of the logarithmic function is positive. X has to be given in 0. All right, and number 15, oh, this is current stuff. They said C. Anybody have a question about that? Cosine negative 1/2?
Yeah.
All right, okay, back at 12:30, annual seats. If I'm a little late, it's because someone's replying. I don't know what's going to happen or not, but I'm in the lineup, so I might be like trying to get glue out of my eyes or something. I don't know.
Just where I'm probably gonna take the quiz after that.
Perfect. I will be right here.
I probably should spectate this, to be honest.
Yeah.